Hey everyone, welcome back. This week I want to talk to you about something which I feel like is occasionally a divisive topic in the fragrance community. It's artificials versus synthetics. Are they good or bad? Which one's better? Stay tuned. To start off, I want to define my terms. When I say natural, what I'm referring to are fragrance molecules, oils that come from natural sources. Either they were distilled from a plant or animal source, increasingly rarer though that is, or something like that. A synthetic is going to obviously be something that was synthesized, something created in a lab. Those are the distinctions I make. My own personal feelings about it, I don't actually care. I'll get into it. I think there are a lot of benefits to synthetics, but let's first start off with, can you identify naturals? The answer to that question is sometimes. I think I've heard, I follow different perfumers, I've read some books, I'm by no means an expert, but my understanding is that when you're talking about naturals and you're talking about absolutes, you are bringing in a whole lot of different fragrance compounds into the fragrance. So I think it's Bulgarian rose or Turkish rose. Some rose has something like 66 different aroma compounds in the absolute. One of those is apparently like asparagus. So they're not all pleasant. Some of them are sulfuric. When you use naturals, you're bringing them all to the party. You don't separate them out. Since you're bringing all of those things in, it's often going to impact the smell. And I was told kind of a shortcut, and I don't know if this is like fully universally true, but I was told that if you can kind of get that vintage sort of tinge from a fragrance, it's an indication of a lot of naturals. An example of that I have is Floris number 89, and that's from Floris in London. This incidentally is the alleged fragrance of the hair oil that James Bond wore. Ian Fleming was such a fan of this fragrance, which I believe came out in 1952. He was such a fan and wore it personally that he kind of wrote it in that this was James Bond's fragrance. So this one is a lot of citruses, like a lot of other things back then. It had a whole lot of other million different notes in it. And when I initially smelled this, I was like, oh, Grandpa, because it just smells like an old fragrance to me. In spite of the fact that this is a new bottle. That has changed over time as my ability to discern notes has increased and as I've kind of my own tastes have changed. I appreciate this more than when I first got it, which is one of the reasons why I got it. I wanted to develop that appreciation. But it definitely smells classic. It definitely smells old. I'm sure it does not smell like it did when it first came out because there are a bunch of banned materials, but it definitely smells strongly of not modern. And so I guess that's my shortcut. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments if that's actually true. But the kind of vintage thing, because a lot of the same notes, I mean, patchouli has been used forever, but there are lots of patchouli fragrances that don't smell this way. So that was a way that I was told a shortcut, is if something has that kind of classic tinge, might be an indication of some naturals in it. In the video here, I want to talk about and give you some examples of good fragrances that are both high-end naturals and high-end synthetics. I'm going to relay this. I don't know if this is true. Again, so I should start off by saying this. Part of the reason why I started this channel was because I started to get obsessed with fragrances as I periodically get obsessed with different things. And rather than bludgeoning my poor wife with endless amounts of knowledge, I decided that I would get an outlet and foist it on anyone who'd listen to me. So a lot of my videos, I'm trying to make them just me regurgitating the things that I'm learning and basically sharing them as I go along. If that's interesting to you, let me know. If not, I guess let me know, but that's the purpose of this channel. So that's the reason why I wanted to make this video. I keep having these thoughts. I think it's interesting and I want to talk about them. I have a couple of examples of fragrances that are high in synthetics. I think all of these smell good, by the way. I didn't bring examples of bad synthetic fragrances or bad naturals. You could probably find those, though I think it's very subjective. The bad synthetics are probably going to be very cheap. Sometimes the cheap fragrances smell great, but usually if they're not spending much money, I usually take that as a sign of quality. Okay, I'm actually going to show you 4 fragrances. I was thinking about this. I've got one fragrance that I believe is high in naturals. I've got 2 fragrances that are synthetics, but I think smell great. And then I've got one fragrance that I think has quite a bit of both. And so I'm going to talk about them all a little bit because I think they all deserve a little bit of discussion. I am going to start off though with one of my favorites, and that is Paris Corner's Emir Cedrat Essence. This one is a clone of Cedrat Boisé, but as I've talked about, I think in a previous video, or if not, at least on Instagram, I actually think I like this one a little bit more than Cedrat Boisé, just because I really like the citruses in this. That being said, this fragrance is a clone. It's very possible that the citruses in this are real, because my understanding of citrus oils is that they're not very expensive. So if you see citruses in a fragrance, there's a very decent chance that they are real, because it just doesn't cost that much to use them. However, that being said, I don't think for $40, for less than half the price of a bottle of Cedrat Boisé, that they're using copious amounts of synthetics or naturals. I think with a lot of clone companies, obviously their goal is to make as close of a smelling fragrance for as cheap as possible, which is going to mean using as many aroma chemicals as they can. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I think especially because they get close in a lot of cases. But I think this is a great example of a fairly inexpensive fragrance that is largely synthetic and it smells great. I think a fragrance that is not a whole lot more expensive than that, about $20 more expensive than that, and for which I am sure I will get flack in the comments for liking this because it's so basic, because I know that there are a lot of people who have strong feelings about that, and that is Armaf's Club de Nuit Intense Man Limited Edition. This one is, I think, people accuse this one of smelling synthetic all the time. I don't really get that. For me, I do get the citruses off the top, but then as an Aventus clone, or clone, not cologne, as an Aventus clone, I feel like it's really evoking that mossy feeling. So maybe there's a lot of synthetics in here. I'm sure there are, because it's a cost game mostly for the clone houses. That's the name of the game. So I'm sure they're using as many synthetics as they can, but I think this smells great, and it doesn't smell synthetic to me. It doesn't smell fake. It smells like citruses and moss, kind of like Aventus. Although, and I mean, not to go down this rabbit hole, but I've got a sampler set from Creed, and I think this both smells and performs better than the current formulation of Aventus. So, and that's a synthetic, and this is like what, 50, 60 bucks. I think people do dispute this, but in my opinion, I think that this is a fairly high quality, highly synthetic fragrance. Your mileage may vary. I really like this a lot. I'm not over Aventus as a scent DNA yet. I'm still new enough to this. I think it smells great. So, also a beast. I'm going off. I'm losing the thread here, but I really like this stuff, and I think that it's a good example of what you can do with synthetics without spending too much. All right, I wanted to include a good example of something with a lot of naturals that's also inexpensive, and so I've got for you Encre Noir à l'Extrême. Again, this is all information that I'm relaying from perfumers and things like that I've learned. My understanding with vetiver is that it actually is not synthetic. Vetiver is one of the notes that we just derive naturally. So this being a vetiver bomb and a lot of resins and smokes, I'm sure there are synthetics in all of these fragrances, but this is a heavy dose of vetiver, and it smells great. It's balanced. I think it's smooth. It's well-rounded, well put together, and because it's very vetiver focused, I think this is going to be, in terms of most fragrances, it's going to be higher in concentration of natural oils. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about ratios. I've been told from different perfumers, different things that I read, general opinion, and if you've heard otherwise, please tell me below. I've heard a good ratio is about 80% aroma chemicals to 20% naturals. I think that's probably on the high end. I think naturals get used a lot less because I think at this point we can do a lot with aroma chemicals to reconstruct the naturals in a way that you don't have to include the sulfur, you don't have to include the asparagus in that rose thing. You can just create the synthetic rose that to you, when you smell it, you go, oh, that's a rose. And it may actually even come across more natural smelling than the natural Rose Absolute. And that's kind of been my experience. That's why I don't have a problem with the synthetics, because the whole point of fragrance is you're trying to evoke certain smells. If the natural version of something doesn't make you think of that, then it's not doing as good of a job, I feel like. So, I think the final example, one that is often commented as being synthetic, and I think that it has a lot of both, is Elysium Pour Homme Cologne from Raja Parfums. I love this stuff. I still love it, still smells amazing. So for this stuff, again, these are all just assumptions based on the information that I've heard readily available. One of the hallmarks of Raja Parfums is that they use high amounts of naturals. If you're using lots of naturals, you also have to be using aroma chemicals to help smooth them out. If you just have naturals, it's going to come across as a little bit more astringent maybe, and maybe a little bit more difficult to smell. So aroma chemicals aren't just mimicking other things, they're also providing texture. They're smoothing things out, they're sweetening fragrances, they're adding some spice, they might add a little bit of a texture of cooling. Again, you can get that from mint, but there's other ways to accomplish these things. So Elysium, being an example of both, doesn't have a lot of real natural smell to it, but you know, there's loads of citruses in this. And I think it's a testament to Raja's creation, his ability to create perfumes, that this doesn't smell dated. This smells modern. Everyone seems to suggest that he uses high quality materials, and I believe it. This is one of those fragrances where it doesn't last 18 hours or whatever. I usually get about 6 hours of performance out of this. So I'm sure that there are actual things in here, synthetics, to help bolster the performance. If you're getting 6 to 8 hours out of a performance or out of a fragrance. One other thing that I didn't talk about is the benefits of aroma chemicals over naturals. We often talk about, like, you know, concerns or whatever, but when you're able to isolate specific fragrance compounds and just synthesize those, you can leave behind other things more than just like the undesirable asparagus or sulfuric notes. You can leave behind allergens. My understanding is often the things that we synthesize are allergen free, which is one of the benefits. You can make more fragrances, have more tools in your belt that are safer for a wider range of people without causing issues. I think that's a cool thing. I like that. I think one of the great benefits of humanity is our ability to advance create new things. And I think fragrance is one of those. I think where we're getting new compounds every year, people are creating new aroma chemicals, giving us a wider range of tools to be able to smell new and incredible things. And I think if we rule out using naturals or synthetics, you're just needlessly writing off something. There's nothing wrong with synthetics. There's nothing wrong with naturals. Like with everything else in life, usually there's some moderation of both that is the best outcome. So, I say, don't listen to the people who tell you that naturals are the only way to go and synthetics are bad. There's nothing wrong with synthetics. The only thing wrong with synthetics is when they're used badly. The same is very true of naturals. When naturals are used badly, that sucks too, like anything. So, enjoy your fragrances, find something that you like the smell of, and who gives a crap if it's natural or synthetic. I think it's interesting to learn, though, how this stuff works. So that's the part I want to dig into. I want to learn more of how the synthetics work. You know, I've got kind of a good understanding of like fixatives and things like that, but I kind of want to learn more about it. So that's kind of be one of the next areas that I start doing a delve into. I want to start buying some crafting materials to try and train my nose like that and see where it goes. Anyway, Hope you found some value out of this. If you did, please leave me a comment, and I'll see you next week. Bye.